Go.
All right, welcome to the snowshoeing techniques session of our Zoom meeting today. This would be super awesome if I had snow back here and it was daytime, but the reality is we have to do these in the evening. So we're gonna just put on your little pretend goggles and imagine that we're in the snow today. So I wanted to talk some just tips and tricks for snowshoes. So first thing are different types of snowshoes. A lot of I tried to find cool names for these types. I couldn't find them on the computer or online, so I just made up my own. So that's what I have put in the outline. So first, there's two main types of snowshoes. First is like a frame style snowshoe. So this kind of a snowshoe has a metal, a metal frame, and then it's got something like this has just a canvasy kind of thing, plastic, that's acting as the cushion. And then you can see they have, and these all have cool names, but I don't know anymore. It has a place for your boot to go right here. And you usually have two straps that go over the boot and then one strap that goes on the back. And then your toe should be, if it's properly fitted, you want to have at least a 1 or 2 inch clearance from this gap here. Because you can see like your toe is going to be moving like that. And you don't want your toe to be catching on this. I'm telling you all these things because I've done them all wrong. So you're learning from my experience. All right, and then on the bottom of these frame snowshoes, you can see these metal points are called crampons. So we have some for our toes, which is super important. You can see on these snowshoes, this connecting point from the shoe platform to the actual snowshoe is pretty burly. And that's something to kind of be aware of when you're looking at a snowshoe. If this part's pretty weak, this part can break. So just be aware. So this snowshoe has several crampons here, and then we've got a couple little ones down here. So this is a really good snowshoe for powder. It's got a lot of good surface area. It's not so good for climbing up icy slopes. You can see if I was on a slope, I don't have that much back here. And so if I'm on a slope, my snowshoe has a tendency to slide down. So just be aware that that's the limitation on these kind of snowshoes. There's also multiple kinds of straps. My favorite, this is kind of a buckle system. My new favorite kind of snowshoe are the MSRs. These are the ones that a lot of rental companies have because they're so burly. And you can see the kind of strap on these ones is a rubber. It's almost like a rubber belt with a little, you kind of feed it through and then it goes back on itself and you put the little metal hook through the hole. Anyway, do you know on these straps, they always have a clip right here. So you would put it through, this one already is kind of fit through, but you clip it through and then make sure you slide it into that little clip. And that just keeps this long tail from getting in the way. So the other kind of snowshoe is what I call the blade snowshoe, just because these are more aggressive snowshoes. You can see that instead, like we still have this toe with the crampons right here, but then they put a lot of they put two solid blades on the sides. What this does is this allows this snowshoe to stick on the side of icy slopes really well. It just, the whole length of the snowshoe. It's doesn't have a frame or anything like that. It's just one long piece of plastic, which allows you to float on the powder okay, but not as good as the other one. But this is a real good all-round mountain snowshoe that can kind of handle slush, snow, all that kind of junk pretty well. So I do like, these are my favorites. Some cool tips that they've added to these snowshoes. I haven't seen them, they're on some of these frame style, but I see them a lot more on these, is a toe riser or a heel riser, sorry. So if you think you're gonna be a kind of an aggressive snowshoer, you wanna hike all those mountains and do all those peaks and all that kind of stuff, you can get these with, it's just kind of like a little bar that goes right kind of around here, hooks here, and it just flips up. And so when you're hiking up, it, instead of your foot going all the way to the bottom, it just kind of goes to here, like a 45 or whatever height heel riser you have. So that when you're stepping, you're not stepping all the way down again. Does that make sense? It's kind of like climbing a mountain on your tippy toes. and it gives you a lot more traction. The other cool feature that snowshoes have is a tail extender. And so this one has 2 little bolts here. And what you do is it's another, on this kind of snowshoe, it's just another piece of plastic that comes out a few inches. And what it does is just adds more surface area to your snowshoe. So snowshoes will have sizes and things and weight recommendations. And what you can do is if you've got a snowshoe that's kind of, you're in the middle weight for it, but you're gonna have, maybe someday you'll have a 30-pound pack or a 40-pound pack. You've got to remember that on top of this snowshoe is gonna, I mean, that's gonna add a lot more weight. So if am I still kind of in the same, am I in the weight, you know, zone for that snowshoe, or should I consider having an extension on the back for, you know, if I'm doing backpack trips in the snow, and just so you stay on the snow. So anyway, those are kind of the cool features with snowshoes. Extra things, gaiters, overboots, and poles. Okay, so snowshoeing is awesome. You want to make sure you're snowshoeing with boots that are waterproof. Maybe on a wonderfully sunny day you can do running shoes, but at any time you might have snow that's going to get on your snowshoe. It's going to soak in your boot. So I prefer 2 kinds of boots. One is, this is an all leather boot, and it just keeps out the water a lot. Or you can do these, we call them pack boots. There's duck boots, whatever you want to call them. So you can see it's got the rubber and then it goes up high. These are kind of nice. They're a little harder. Your feet kind of slosh around a little bit more in these, but you have this protection to keep the snow out of your ankles, which is nice. If you don't have something like this and you're snowshoeing with something like this, I recommend a gaiter. So a gaiter are super cool. I like the ones with Velcro, not zippers. And what this does is, here, John, put your foot up here, sweetheart. Imagine he has a boot on. So we're gonna take this and it hooks on, this slides over his foot. And it Velcros in the front, which is nice. And then it has a little hook here. And this hook hooks onto the boot, like the boot strings. If you imagine this part of your boot right here. And that's what keeps it from riding up. And then this also has a rubber, oh, did you put it on?
Like a stirrup? No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's like a stirrup that goes under
around
your boot, right in front of the heel. That makes sense. Here we go.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your fault that I got this on wrong, right? Anyway,
There
so
we
that
go.
goes underneath. And you want to make sure that when you pull this up, that's not getting so high that snow can get in here. You want to make sure that this is pulled down tight enough that you get some good protection. The idea is that now that extends that snow protection if you just have a regular boot all the way as high as your knees, which is a good place, you know, and hopefully you're not snowshoeing deeper snow than that. The other item is if you wanted to, some of our gals just don't have waterproof boots. So if you just have a plain old running shoe and want to go snowshoeing, there's something called an overboot. And an overboot kind of looks like these, only it's a little more spacious, has more room. And you essentially put your running shoe inside here, and this provides protection over the whole shoe and up your leg. And you can rent those from BYU, I think, in UVU. Anyway, we have it on all our activities. We tell you where to rent those. Anyway, so that's kind of nice to keep your snow from getting in your shoes and stuff like that. All right, now putting on snowshoes. Kind of talked a little bit about it. You want to make sure that you have your 2 straps. We're going to put our boot in here. A lot of you guys have done this now a few times. You kind of know what you're doing. All right, so we're going to do it on the MSR. Here we go. Marilyn says the overshoes are $5 at BYU, by the way. So if you don't have waterproof shoes, you don't have to break the bank. Okay, so I've got my boot here. And I want to make sure that I've got a good size gap. See how that's it's probably about as much. See how much you might get a toe grabbing over that, like you might have some scraping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this back heel up a bit, pull that boot back, and now see I've got a good size gap right there. All right, so I usually like to adjust the heel first. And then I just am putting that, and on the MSRs, I just hook it through, put it through the little clip like I mentioned. And then you can do the same thing with these front straps. And on these ones, they kind of hook underneath, and then they just come up like that, and you push this through there. Now, some of you guys have seen the snowshoe ones that have like, it's almost like a handle that connects these two straps. Those are awesome, especially when you've got mittens on. Just think if I'm buying a pair of snowshoes, I am likely not gonna want to take off my gloves to put on all this stuff. So I wanna have something that's super easy to just be like, rah, rah, that you can even practice with mittens, you know, and just see if it's gonna work out for you. Anyway, so that's snowshoeing. They're really super easy. It's like one of the easiest things that we can do in the wintertime. I really recommend snowshoeing just generally for people too who are just getting into winter sports and trying to figure out what if winter sports is their theme. So, all right. Also, another thing about poles, I highly recommend poles with snowshoeing, especially if you're in uneven terrain. A pole, you can use hiking poles. You just have to make sure that your arm is at a 90-degree angle and sized. So if you're standing up, your hand is on the handle of the pole and your arm is at a 90-degree angle. If your arm is too high, the pole is too high. If it's like this, it's too short. So that's how you would appropriately size your poles. And then also another tip with poles is to make sure that the baskets, there's baskets at the bottom. A basket is a little plastic circle that has some surface area on it. It just looks like the bottom of a ski pole. If you use a hiking pole, a trekking pole, and it's just the spike, you can just imagine if you get deep enough snow, you're actually there's a potential you could actually lose your ski pole or your hiking, trekking poles in there. Just because they stab in the snow. I've had them and just lost them all the way down if the snow is super deep. So do make sure that you've got your, I'm trying to grab my other boot. Do make sure that you've got your, those baskets on the bottom of those ski poles. As far as good weather for snowshoeing, you can snowshoe in any weather. My favorite weather is actually at night. I love night snowshoeing. It's my favorite thing. You can do this sunny days, cloudy days, snowy days. The most important thing is to know that is to be aware of avalanche danger. And avalanches aren't usually something that's on your radar as a snowshoer because you're like, I'm just hiking my favorite trail that I do in the summertime. But in the wintertime, it can be very dangerous. On the website or on the paper I printed or typed up for you guys, I have a couple links onto different kinds of, I have one for the KBYG, I think, Know Before You Go is what it stands for. And everyone should just take a look at that. There's a 1-hour video on their main page that kind of describes just basic what everyone should know if they're going out into the mountains, just what things you need to, just red flags that you should be aware of. Some of the red flags are just to kind of be aware of as a lay person, I guess, if you've had any severe weather changes. So if we went for like recently we've had like no moisture whatsoever. And so everything's been melting in the mountains. And then all of a sudden last week we had huge dumps of snow. So anytime you have a big change in weather or a lot of snow that comes all of a sudden, the next few days following that are going to be huge avalanches because the mountains are trying to settle themselves out. So snow is going to be sliding and moving and all that kind of stuff. So you want to stay out of the mountains on those days. Another thing to watch out for, so that's like a weather change. The other thing is temperature changes. If things went from warm to cold really fast or from cold to warm really fast. That's something else to be concerned about. If a slope that you're snowshoeing on is on the perfect angle, which is between 30 and 45 degrees, it's the perfect angle of fun. That's also the perfect angle for for avalanches. Also, something to be aware of are called terrain traps. A terrain trap is what it looks like is kind of like a gully. In the summertime, you don't even think about it, but in the wintertime, if I'm hiking along the edge of this gully and this slides, or even below me goes, I fall into this gully and all the snow around me falls into this gully and it just buries you. We had a woman die several years ago just above Tibble Fork Reservoir. She was stuck in a little terrain trap, and it was probably like 15 feet high. It wasn't anything crazy. So just be aware that we want to stay out of gullies. We want to stay on ridges or in big meadows with nothing above us. So just be aware. Yeah, ridges are my favorites. Stay out of those gullies. Absolutely. And then rent the gear. If you're going to go anywhere where you're a little bit worried about avalanches, then consider learning about how to use an avalanche beacon, probe, and shovel. We're not going to talk about that stuff today, but we are going to have an avalanche class on Saturday. So if you're interested, you can definitely text me and we can get you into that. But that's something to really take seriously. All right, now let's get to those are the red flags of weather. We're going to get into the fun techniques. All right, so I'm going to have my IT guy put the focus on the snowshoes. This is called living room snowshoeing. It's a good thing we didn't vacuum our shag carpet. No, just kidding. All right, so the first thing, I'm on the, here, do you want to pull it up a little bit? Hi. On the paper I wrote, I have a link for a really awesome video on snowshoe techniques that I got a lot of this from. It's 15 minutes, but it's everything you want to know. Those of you guys who were guides and trained as snowshoe guides last fall watched it. It's really cool. It's a guy who's snowshoeing in like 3 feet of powder. So he really shows you all the techniques. The first thing to know is how to get up, especially how to get up if you're stuck. And I forgot to bring my poles here. But essentially, yeah, do you want to go grab some poles?
Sure, you got it.
Okay. Then we'll skip this. We'll go back to this in a second. The third thing we'll teach you right now is the stride. The thing to remember with snowshoeing is your feet have got these weird things on them now. And so we have to have a wider stance. We're not like our normal, because you're going to just step on each. So we've got a wider stance and also to step up a lot more. And you'll notice that you can kick. I'll kick the back of my snowshoe, and that really helps with snow that might be accumulating back here. All right, so that's kind of how this is how I'm actually usually walking nice and high steps, especially if there's lots of snow. Okay, so as in all things, it's good to know what to do when things go wrong. So if I fall down in our snow that we've had, we usually don't have a problem, but imagine if you had 2 feet of powder, you fall down, you're like, oh my gosh, you could suffocate and die. It's no good. So if you have, this is another good reason to snowshoe with poles. You have your 2 poles and you use these as a greater surface area. So what you can do is just pack the snow down around you, pack, roll over onto your side and make sure that your snowshoes are flat. They're not like this. So you bring your snowshoes in, make sure they're looking good. I don't like to have my feet on top because that's not going to work. Stagger them. Then I'm going to roll over on my knees and show you my underwear. Yeah. All right, like this. And then I'm going to get up with 1 foot and I'm using this as my stable force to keep me from sliding face first in the snow. Then I get one knee and I push up and get on 2 knees and then stand up. So that could save your life if you like to snowshoe in deep powder. All right, now talking about turning around, what we want to do is the same idea as the stride. Turning around, we're going to step and then do your other flip. Does that make sense? It's not, you can't just like la la la. If the powder is really deep, you really got to like take it a step at a time. All right. Another thing we'll be doing, if you ever have deep powder, is you break trail. A lot of times you have trails that are already packed down, and that's lovely. But if you don't, or you just like to go off trail, like I love to do, what you're gonna do is step high in that deep, deep powder, and do lots of small steps. Now, if I'm going up a hill, it's hard to show on this, but I'm going to push in like here. If this is my hill coming down, I'm going to push in and make a step. Then push in, make a step, if that makes sense. So you're getting like a diagonal step up the mountain. but it's called edging, where you're pushing that edge really hard into the mountain so you can get a good solid platform as you're stepping up. Now ascending, there's a few different techniques for ascending. If there's already trail, you're just stepping and it's nothing big deal. But if you want to go off trail, there's a few techniques that are really cool. One's called the herringbone. If you're a cross-country skier, it's the way you go up. The idea is that if I'm coming up, say like this is the hill towards you, I'm gonna go like this. Herringbone. Do you see that kind of like a V? And that keeps me from sliding back. The other one is scrambling, which is just like, it's literally scrambling. I've done that. You grab branches and stuff like that, and you really try and kick your toe. Because remember, your toe has these sharp things on it. You just kick that toe in there and you're just scrambling up. It's actually an official technique. Then there's sidestepping, which is kind of what we talked about with breaking tail, where you're going up. Choo, choo. The trick to sidestepping up a hill is you don't cross your feet. If you can imagine, I step and then I'm in an unstable position right here and I can totally fall. So while I'm making this crossover move. So it's way better to go step, 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 sidestepping. Kick stepping is similar to that, kind of like I talked about. That's when you're going straight up a mountain and you're just going like this, like a ladder, and you're really pounding in that toe. Really nice, and using those teeth to really bite in. So that's ascending. Traversing is pretty straightforward. It's when you can, usually traversing, you're going like on a diagonal up a slope, and you're using that edging technique and kind of stepping, step, 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 step. You can also do switchbacks. Switchbacks, if anyone's done them on a steep slope, are awesome until you have to turn the other direction. So it involves a little trickiness. So we're going up, side step, side step, side step, and then I've got to go this way. So what I'm going to do is I plant my poles. Very important. Plant my poles. I'm going to do a 180 like that. And then this is the precarious position. Then you're going to bring your other foot like that. And now we go side step, side step, side step. Then a 180, stuff like that. It's a tricky technique. So practice on slower slopes. I always seem to do that when it's like 45 degrees and we're going to slide down. It's awful. All right. So descending steps, we have the same idea. If you're descending a slope, you can just side step, like we talked about, side step, side step, side step down. The other technique, if you're a little crazy, is the step glide. So this is great in powder. What you do is you're going to step and then you actually put your weight from the center of your foot to your heel. And you can see these ones, it doesn't work as well because they have blades back there that are going to catch. But if I'm on a snowshoe like this is all flat and smooth. And it's got a couple crampons, but generally it's pretty flat. So when you step and you lean back, it's going to start to slide. And it's really fun. Some of our gals tried to try this recently on a trip and weren't able to. So you kind of have to have a steep enough slope. But yeah, that's step gliding. It's super fun. If you can ever get a good powder day, it's amazing. Downhilling is another technique. And it's kind of like, if any of you guys have seen a telly skier, they do stuff like when they're making turns, they go like this. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing. My snowshoe's coming up. I'm doing the same thing with my snowshoes. So I'm coming down and I'm stepping, and probably should get this bit right. Hold on. Okay. It's too much. This carpet's too much. Okay. So I'm on my slope, and I step here, and I bend my knee. And as I'm bending my knee, what that does is it brings up the tail. And so I just have a couple points here. So I don't have as much friction. Does that make sense? As much contact with the snow, and it allows this foot to slide a little bit. And I can do the same thing, and I slide. So hard to explain on the carpet, but I don't know, log it away. Maybe you try it someday. Then there's also running, just straight up running. It's super fun in snowshoes, especially going downhill. The big trick to that is do high steps and you're doing that same thing where you're kicking the snow off the back of your heels. But you can totally run and it's super fun. And then glissading, if you're on something big that you got to descend a lot of elevation, you can glissade. Glissading is just kind of sliding down on your butt. I don't recommend it unless you have like a pole, which is not the best, or an ice axe, which is even better. But you're using that to kind of be your brake, but you're sliding down on your butt, and you want to make sure that you keep your crampons up. If you have your crampons down, you're not going to go anywhere. And also they can get caught. And I always tell people you rip your leg off. So always keep your spikes up on your snowshoes. If they can stay on top of the powder. But just be careful. This is kind of a tenuous position to be in if they did flip and catch something. And then you could use, I guess you could use your pole and be like, anyway, when I glissade, I take off my snowshoes and I just use a cramp, or I use an axe. So that's it. So that's like a fire hose of coolness, of snowshoe coolness. Do any of you guys have any questions? If not, give me a thumbs up. Jazz, Erin, Erica, Lisa, Marilyn, was that confusing? Okay, we got it. All right. Well, thank you ladies so much for joining me tonight on today's living room snowshoeing to class. And next month, we're going to talk about cross-country skiing. So that'll be super fun and teach a couple more techniques. So have a wonderful evening and we love you lots.